Comparison is not the thief of joy. Unhealthy or toxic comparison is the thief of joy. Purge it, get rid of it, exclude it, eliminate it from your life. Individuals who are doing better than you in areas that you want to improve, and ask yourself, is this inspiring me? Is this motivating me? Is this compelling me to do better? And if it is, then you're using comparison as a very powerful tool for self-development and improvement in your life. But healthy, positive, edifying comparison might actually bring you more fulfillment than you have right now. Men, today I want to talk with you about the comparison trap. Every single one of us has heard of it. Every single one of us has fallen into the comparison trap, and it ends up stifling growth and progress and expansion and just positive, optimistic feelings in your life. And one thing I've been really focusing on lately is trying to be more optimistic and hopeful and positive about the thoughts that I allow to enter into my brain. And when we fall into the comparison trap and we negatively compare ourselves to others, it's hard for us to move forward in confidence. It's hard for us to feel good about maybe the work that we've done up to this point. We feel inferior, we feel inadequate, and we lose hope in improvement and getting better. So today I'm going to share with you 3 very simple things that you can do to eliminate the negative effects of comparison trap. Now, I will say that comparing yourself to other people in a healthy way is actually a good thing. And done correctly, comparing to what is possible, comparing in a healthy way, will lead to positivity and growth and fostering feelings of encouragement and optimism and hope for your future. So it's really, really important that first and foremost, we are able to differentiate between when it's positive and when it's negative. Now, we hear a lot of different phrases. One of the phrases that immediately comes to mind for me is comparison is the thief of joy. Look, guys, I know it's important to be happy and joyful and optimistic and hopeful in your life. It is for me. And if we have those feelings, then I believe that we're much more likely to move forward with the actions that need to be taken to improve our lives. If comparing yourself is robbing you from that, then obviously we need to eliminate that. But where does comparison actually serve you? Let's talk about it today. I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to weave some other conversations into this discussion today. But this is something that I've really been thinking about and pondering on. And of course, I've gotten a lot of good feedback from other guests that have been on the Order of Man podcast. And I would highly encourage you to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode with our guest. So number one, if you want to do comparison in a healthy way, then the first thing you need to acknowledge and recognize is that it's your job to find other people who are doing what you want to be doing and achieving the results that you want to achieve. Again, there's nothing wrong with comparing yourself to other people if it edifies and uplifts you. If it demoralizes and demeans what you're doing, then you know that's not a good use of your time. But I look to all sorts of people every single day, many of which have been on this podcast, and I don't have any thoughts of negativity. I don't demoralize or demean or belittle myself when I see that somebody else is producing at a higher level than I am. In fact, a lot of these guys are very encouraging and hopeful and optimistic to me, and very supportive, by the way. That's what I found, is that the successful people that I want to surround myself with are encouraging and supportive of what I'm doing, and they uplift me. They don't push me down. Now, there are those who will push you down, and those are people we need to avoid. But the first step in using comparison to your advantage is to acknowledge that there are people out ahead of you. And we do not, for the most part, operate in a zero-sum game where if somebody else is succeeding, then you're automatically losing. Imagine that in the context of the gym, for example. Let's say you go to the gym, you get up at 5, 6 o'clock every morning, you go into the gym, you see some guys that are more fit than you, more strong than you, more capable than you, and you see some guys who are less fit, maybe a little overweight, maybe not as strong as you might be. But when you go into the gym, Do you believe for a second that if one man gets strong, that he's taking away your ability to build strength? Of course not, because we really don't operate in a zero-sum game unless you're being illegal, immoral, or unethical. Even in a capitalistic society, and I know competition, we can talk about that. So there might be some competition for resources or for clients. But again, we're not operating in a zero-sum game. We've got, 8.5, maybe even closer to 9 billion people on the planet. There's no way that I can service with the amount of resources and assets that I have within my business, 9 billion people, or even 4.5 billion if we're talking about just men, because that's who we market to. When I get into this mentality of zero sum or competing with other people, then it's easy for me to fall into a negative space where I start comparing myself to what other people are doing and how they're doing it. Now, I use comparison even for those people in my current space who are out ahead of me to show me what is possible. And that's the differentiating factor here. If you can look at somebody and say, man, that guy's paving the way. I remember years ago when Joe Rogan struck a deal with Spotify, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but if I recall, his contract was reported to be over $300 million to sign that contract with Spotify. Does that take away from what I'm doing? No. It paves the way. It actually proves that podcasting is a viable, economically sustainable business model. So it's not diminishing what I'm doing. If anything, it's edifying and uplifting what it is I'm doing. But if I look at it and think, well, man, Joe Rogan got this $300 million Spotify deal, so there's nothing I can do to achieve that, or that's less money on the table for me, then of course I'm going to have negative feelings about it. I'm going to beat myself up about it. I'm going to call myself a loser because I'm not achieving what he's achieving, and it's going to create problems for me. So I think the first step in defeating this comparison trap mentality and instead just realizing that there's people who are doing it better than you and using it as fuel is acknowledging that those people are doing something right, and it's not a zero-sum game. They're not taking anything away from you, and instead they're illuminating, whether it's directly or indirectly, a path that you can follow to improve in your own life. And part of the way that we deal with that is just asking for help. Let's go back to the gym analogy. Let's say you go into the gym every day and you see this guy and he's shredded and he's jacked and he's ripped and you bump into him, or you're using some of the same machines, but you've never made any reasonable attempt to connect with him. I would encourage you to say, hey man, we bump into each other every single morning at the gym. Sometimes we trip over the weights or the machines, but I'm Ryan. What's your name? And then maybe a week later, it's like, hey, Joe, we met last week. Things seem like they're going well for you. Everything good? And then maybe the following week, it's like, hey, look, I notice your physique. You're stronger than I am. I'm trying to improve my own physique or my performance, or I'm doing this competition. Do you have any pointers on building strength, or any pointers on rounding out my shoulders, or any pointers on how to do a proper form deadlift? Like, whatever. But it's really, really important that we think of these things in a positive, supportive, uplifting way, and an abundance mentality, as opposed to the scarcity zero-sum mentality. That shift alone, if you can get out of the idea that if somebody else gets, I lose, if you can get out of that idea, then I don't think you'll ever find yourself comparing in a negative way. So that's point number one, is look for people who are doing what you want to be doing, and then model them, build relationships with them, connect with them, support them, and asking them for help. Number two, I always look for humility in people. There's plenty of people who are more successful, and there's plenty of people who are less successful than I am. For the people who are more successful, I realize they're doing something right, but I'm going to look for a humble person. If somebody's egotistical or arrogant or has excessive pride, then that is going to rub off. And I'm not really interested in exhibiting that toward that behavior for myself or towards any of you. Now, that's not to say I don't fall into that trap from time to time. We're all human. We all make mistakes and we all get pride and vanity at times. But if I see other people that are doing better than I am, but they're not humble about it, that's not somebody I'm interested in following. And I can't do that. I can't follow somebody who isn't willing to help and serve, who doesn't have that servant's heart, who doesn't want to teach and coach and educate and inspire. They could have all the success in the world, all the tangible and immeasurable success that I want to have, but if they're not humble about the way that they're achieving it, I'm not interested in forming a relationship with that person, because that is toxic behavior. And if they're exhibiting toxic behavior and I'm modeling who they are, what they're doing, or how they show up, then I naturally am going to exhibit some of the same traits and behaviors. And I'm not interested in being arrogant, egotistical, or exhibiting excessive pride. I'm interested in humility, kindness, empathy, grace, a servant's heart, a desire to lead, a desire to coach and train and educate, a desire to see people do things that maybe I haven't even been able to do in my own personal life. But it's the humility that I'm looking for in an individual. When we follow actors or celebrities or musicians or Instagram influencers or podcasters, and they're so full of themselves, that creates toxic traits in us. And it makes us angry. And you may not even acknowledge it, but it makes us angry, even subconsciously, and irritable and impatient and intolerant. And these are not characteristics that I personally want to exhibit, and I don't think they're characteristics you want to exhibit. If, on the other hand, you have a very successful person that you're modeling or you're inspired by, but they're humble, they reach out to their audience, they serve their audience. When you message them, they may message you back. They may want to connect with you. Maybe they remember your name or remember something about a previous conversation. Maybe they're very gracious after their presentation at the last conference you went to, and they shook your hand and they looked you in the eye and they gave you time and attention like you were the only person in the room. That's people that we should follow. Those are the kind of men that we want to be like. That's the kind of behavior that we want to emulate. And anybody who does not exhibit that behavior, we just can't support. We can't follow. We can't pay for their events or their programs or their courses or whatever. And we cannot support those individuals because we don't support those behaviors in ourselves. Therefore, we're not going to edify them in other people. That's point number 2. Look for humility and find those leaders who you're inspired by who are humble. Number 3, if you feel compelled to engage in toxic behavior because you're following somebody, whether it's personally or even on social media, if you're compelled to engage in toxic behavior, purge them from your life. I'll give you a small example. And by the way, when I say this, I want to throw this disclaimer out here because I'm going to actually use a name. This does not mean I think less of this person. This does not mean that I think this person does not exhibit the humility I talked about earlier. This does not mean that this person is not somebody worthy of following. What it means is that whatever it was about that person in the moment at the time was causing me to engage in toxic behavior, and so I had to purge it. And that person is Brett McKay with Art of Manliness. Again, I'm going to be very clear about this. Brett is doing amazing work. He's leading the charge for masculinity. He's teaching men how to be men. He's doing great work regarding podcasts. He's very intelligent. We have a couple of different paths, the way we're communicating it and articulating it to our audiences. But I believe that Brett is doing wonderful work. But for whatever reason, and I don't fully even know what it was, when I started Order of Man about 9.5, almost 10 years ago now, I wanted to be like Brett. I saw what he was doing. I saw what he was creating. I saw how he was leading and how he was serving. And I thought, this is the model. This is what I want to do. And what I found is that I was constantly comparing myself to him, my social media following, the amount of podcast downloads, what kind of guests I was getting on my podcast. And I became almost in a way obsessive over what Brett was doing at the expense of my own work. And every time I saw that he had a guest that I wanted that said no to me, or he grew his account by more than what I happened to grow my account for the week, whatever little comparison metric I fell into, it was toxic to me. I didn't feel good. It did not give me a sense of hope and optimism. I was discouraged when I saw it. I was frustrated when I saw it. And I made the smartest decision I ever could have made when it comes to falling into this negative comparison trap. And I just purged him from my life, in this case, from my social media feed. And I didn't see it anymore. I unsubscribed to his emails. I stopped following his Instagram account because for whatever reason, at the moment I was in that point in my life and that point in my business, it just wasn't producing positive, healthy outcomes. So I stopped following. I stopped looking at his emails. I stopped visiting his website. I stopped going to check out his YouTube channel. I just stopped. And out of sight, out of mind. Lo and behold, when I stopped, it really wasn't about Brett anymore. It was about what I wanted to create. It gave me the capacity and the time and the space and even the margin to think about how I wanted to create this movement. Now, after 10 years, we can see that Brett's track is a little different than my track, and both are great. There's no problem with either. But by purging that from my life, it allowed me the space that I need and even the permission that I needed to move on and not have to consume myself with what somebody over here was doing. It was robbing me of my joy. That comparison trap I fell into with him in particular was robbing me of my joy. Now, that being said, today, I follow Brett. I do subscribe to his emails. I do listen to his podcast. I do see what he's doing on YouTube because the way that I view it now is no longer in competition and it's no longer creating any sort of toxic feeling for me. It's very positive. It's very encouraging. It's very uplifting. I'm inspired by it. I see what he does and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Or that's unique. Or I never considered that. Or there's a guest I might want to get on my podcast and ask some different questions. But that's the litmus test. How do you feel when you compare yourself to other people? Most will say, don't ever compare yourself to others. I don't agree. I think it's very important that we find, point number one, people who are doing better than us in the avenue that we want to improve in, and then emulate, model, copy, grow, learn from those people. But the litmus test is, how does this comparison make you feel? And the very simple question is this: does this person undermine what I'm trying to do, or at least my perception of this person or the relationship I have with this individual, whether it's indirect or non-direct or direct? Does it undermine what I'm trying to do? Does it make me feel bad in some way? Or does it inspire me? Does it cause me to reflect on what I might be able to do better and how I can do it better? And is it encouraging and edifying and uplifting? If it's that, comparison is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It shows you what is possible. You don't even know what's possible because we operate inside of these boxes that we create ourselves. And I use the gym all the time because it's a simple analogy to be able to use, but if we're at the gym and all we've ever deadlifted is 250 pounds, it's really hard for a person to fathom the fact that they might be able to lift double that. 400 pounds or 2.5 times 500 pounds. It's very difficult for us to fathom that. Now you might say, well, I'm at 200 now or 250 now. I could definitely get to 300, but it's limiting because you can only stretch so far outside of the Overton window. The Overton window is the window in which you operate. And if it's at the gym, it's like, I know I can do 250 and I might be able to push to 300, but 400, that's not possible for me. 500, never. I will never be able to pull 500. So if you're not comparing yourself to other men, then you're always going to operate in that Overton window. But if you know in your heart of hearts that you can actually get better than what you perceive yourself to be able to do currently, then you have to compare yourself to other people. I have to look at somebody like Joe Rogan and say, oh, that's possible. I have to look at the strongest men that I know and say, hey, I'm pulling 250, 300 pounds. These guys are pulling 550, 600 pounds. I guess it's possible. It expands our horizons. It opens us up to new possibilities. And so I hate the phrase comparison is the thief of joy because it doesn't articulate the nuance. And the nuance is that there's actually a really healthy way to look at comparing yourself to other people. There's countless examples I could give you. John Lovell, Warrior Poet Society is another one. John and I started about the same time. We work in similar demographics, overlapping some different conversations and bullet points. John has done tremendously better than me at certain things. And if I can be so arrogant to say that I've done better than John in Warrior Poet Society in certain things, but it doesn't hurt me when I know that he's done better things. And I don't think it hurts him to know that I'm good at other things that we've actually talked about and had conversations about. But I can learn from John. And I do. I watch him. I talk with him. We have phone calls. I ask him questions. Hey, you're doing this. That was good. How's this work? Or how's that work? And he does the same. Neither one of us feel demoralized. Neither one of us are operating in a zero-sum game. And we're both better precisely because we're comparing, not because we aren't. As I grow older and maybe a little bit more mature at 43 years old, I realize that my personality defaults to black and white. Yes or no, black and white, right or wrong, this or that. But as I get older, I realize maybe there's some nuance to every single thing that I've ever heard. And if I can find the space that seems to work well for me and operate in that space somewhere in the gray, somewhere in the middle that I didn't previously look, I open myself up to new possibilities and new horizons and new opportunities. My challenge for you today, guys, is to ponder on where you are comparing yourself to other people and you're hurting yourself. Because you're not hurting them. They might not even know you exist. Is there an employee? Is there an Instagram account? Is there a podcast you listen to that you're following and it just makes you feel horrible about yourself to the point where you don't want to do anything and it demoralizes you? Purge it. Get rid of it. Exclude it. Eliminate it from your life. There's accounts that I quote unquote should follow because they're in this space that I don't, because I don't like the feeling that I get when I follow those people. And it's not even about them. They're not bad people. I just don't like the feeling I get. And then the secondary challenge is I want you to look at individuals who are doing better than you in areas that you want to improve and ask yourself, is this inspiring me? Is this motivating me? Is this compelling me to do better? And if it is, then you're using comparison as a very powerful tool for self-development and improvement in your life. It's the gray area. It's not black or white. Comparison is not the thief of joy. Unhealthy or toxic comparison is the thief of joy. But healthy, positive, edifying comparison might actually bring you more fulfillment than you have right now. Think about it, ponder on it. And on that note, I want to let you know we've got a great resource that may or may not work for you. It works for a lot of guys. It's worked for literally tens of thousands of men at this point. And that is the Iron Council. We're opening up mid-September. So we're, 9 days away from opening up. And in the Iron Council, you're going to find two types of people. People who are doing better than you in certain areas and people who are not doing so good as you in other areas. And there's value in both. Again, comparison. I'm doing better than that guy, maybe not as well as that guy. The people who are doing better than you in the Iron Council, the beauty is they're willing to turn around and offer a hand and a help and input and advice and help you get better. And for those who are further behind, those are people that you can serve and lead. And you can turn around and offer a hand to the same way somebody offered a hand to you. So regardless of whatever success spectrum we want to look at, there's value in learning from men in the Iron Council, and there's value in adding value to other men in the Iron Council. We're opening up in, September 15th. If you go to orderaband.com/Iron Council, you're going to watch a very quick, I think it's a 4-minute video, explains what we're doing, shows the highlights, gives you some testimonials, all the regular stuff. Go check it out. Band with us. Find men who you can compare yourself to in positive, healthy, empowering ways. All right, guys, that's your marching orders for today. Appreciate all of you guys. If you have any questions, thoughts, considerations, ideas on future topics, conversations, or guests you'd like to have me on, or let me say that again, guests that you'd like to have on this podcast. There we go. Tripping over my words. Then please let me know who those people are, and I'll do my best to reach out to them and connect with them. All right, guys. I hope that helps. Until then, go out there, take action, compare yourself to the right people in the right way, and become the man you are meant to be.